The year is 1470. In the mountains of Thessaly, a bell rings one final time across a valley that will never hear it again. Inside the convent of St. Catherine, 23 women kneel in prayer. Their lips move in unison, repeating the words they've spoken every morning for years. But this morning, those same words taste different, like ash, like goodbye. Outside the stone walls, the horizon bleeds red, not from sunrise, but from the banners of an empire that has already swallowed entire kingdoms. The Ottoman army doesn't march. It moves like a river of steel and fire, washing over everything in its path and leaving nothing behind. Sister Elani, the abbess, holds a silver crucifix that has survived 3 generations. Her hands tremble, but not from fear. She knows what's coming. They all do. What none of them know, what no one could have imagined, is that death would have been a mercy, because what happened next was never written in any history book you studied. It was buried, erased, hidden beneath centuries of silence. Until now. What the Ottomans did to these women wasn't just conquest. It was something far more deliberate. Something historians are only now beginning to uncover. The question isn't whether you can handle the truth. It's whether you're willing to remember it. If you've ever wondered why certain stories disappear from history while others are repeated again and again, you're exactly where you need to be. Here on Crimson Historians, we dig into the archives the world forgot. Missionary letters, Ottoman state records, testimonies locked away in Vatican vaults. Every view, every like, every subscription helps us pull one more lost voice out of the darkness. Now, let's go back to that convent, because the bell has stopped ringing and the doors are about to break. To understand what happened to these nuns, you need to understand the machine that consumed them. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople had fallen. The jewel of Christendom, the city that had survived for over 1,000 years, collapsed in 53 days of cannon fire and blood. The Hagia Sophia, once the greatest cathedral in the world, was stripped of its crosses within hours. Its mosaics were plastered over. Its bells melted. Within a week, the call to prayer rose from its domes where Christian hymns had echoed for 9 centuries. Sultan Mehmed II stood in the nave of that ancient church and declared it a mosque. Not because he needed another place of worship, but because he understood something most conquerors never learn. You don't defeat a people by killing them. You defeat them by erasing who they were. The Ottomans didn't just conquer land. They conquered identity. When Mehmed looked west toward the scattered remnants of the Byzantine world, he saw wounds that refused to close. Every church bell that still chimed, every monastery still standing, every cross casting a shadow across conquered soil. These were acts of defiance, proof that the old world still breathed. And every nun still praying in Latin was a living reminder that faith could outlast armies. So the Sultan made a decision. If they will not convert, they will disappear, not through massacre. Massacre creates martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. People write songs. They tell stories. The dead become immortal. No. The Ottomans had perfected something far more efficient. Something that left behind no songs, no stories, no memory at all. Erasure. By 1470, this strategy had been tested across the empire. Greek monasteries in Morea, Serbian convents across the Balkans, Armenian churches in Anatolia. They didn't burn them all. Some they converted, others they abandoned, but the pattern remained the same. First came the offer, then came the silence. The convent of St. Catherine, perched on a hillside in Thessaly, far from any garrison or ally, was about to become another test case, another footnote in an empire's expansion. But these women didn't know they were footnotes. They weren't warriors. They had spent their entire lives in silence and prayer. Their weapons were rosaries. Their armor was faith. Most had never seen a soldier, never held a blade, never imagined they would need to. Sister Elani had been abbess for 12 years. Before that, she cared for the sick in a village that no longer existed, lost to plague in 1448. She came to the convent not to escape the world, but to understand it. Sister Magdalena was 19. She had taken her vows just 2 years earlier. The calluses from her father's farm still marked her palms. She joined the convent after losing her family in a raid. It was the only place she had felt safe since. Sister Theodoris was 70. She had outlived 2 abbesses, an emperor, and more wars than she could count. She had stopped fearing death decades ago, but none of them had ever faced anything like this. And if this moment in history doesn't move you to learn more, you might be missing the lesson our ancestors died trying to teach. That the most dangerous thing you can do in the face of power is refuse to forget who you are. Now let's watch what happens when faith meets empire. The first cannonball hits just after dawn. It doesn't strike the chapel, it hits the bell tower. The sound is apocalyptic. Stone bursts into the air, iron screams against iron, and the bell that has rung every morning for 140 years shatters mid-swing. Its pieces crash down onto the courtyard where the sisters once grew herbs for healing. The same hands that tended those plants now tremble as they cover their ears. Sister Elani doesn't scream. She rises, holding her crucifix high, and begins to sing, Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. One by one, the others join her. 23 voices rising against the roar of an empire. But empires don't listen to songs. By midday, the gates are breached. Ottoman soldiers pour into the courtyard, not with swords drawn, but with ledgers, quills, and ink pots. They move through the convent like clerks instead of conquerors, counting, recording, cataloging. Because to the Ottomans, these women aren't people. They are assets. A translator steps forward, a Greek man who once lived in these same hills. His voice shakes as he reads from a scroll, and you can hear the shame buried in every word. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all subjects of the conquered territories must submit to the authority of the Sublime State. Those who convert will be granted protection. Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Elani steps forward. Her face is calm, almost peaceful. She speaks not to the soldiers, but to the translator. Her Greek so clear that everyone present understands. Tell your Sultan that we have already given our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender. The officer in charge, a man named Hassan Pasha, whose name appears in Ottoman military records from the 1470 Thessalian campaign, doesn't respond with anger. Instead, he smiles, a quiet, knowing smile, because he understands something the nuns do not. The Ottomans have perfected the art of breaking people without killing them. That night, the women are locked inside their own chapel. No food, no water, just darkness and the muffled sound of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, living, while the nuns wait to see who will break first. Two of the younger sisters from Corinth begin to sob in the corner. Their cries bounce harshly off the stone walls. But Sister Magdalena, barely 20 years old, starts to whisper a psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Then another. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Another. Slowly, the weeping stops. This is the moment the Ottomans miscalculated. These women had spent their entire lives preparing for suffering, fasting, vigils in the cold, hours of silence, submission to a power greater than themselves. What the soldiers considered torture was simply the nuns' daily discipline. But Hassan Pasha is patient. He has seen this before, in Maria, in Wallachia, in the ruins of Serbian monasteries where monks believed their faith alone would save them. Faith is like a candle, he once wrote in a letter to the Sultan, still preserved in the Topkapi Palace archives. It burns brightest just before it dies. He's about to test that theory. On the second day, the doors open. A servant enters carrying bread and water. Real food, clean water. He sets it down quietly and leaves. The nuns stare at it. Their throats are dry, their stomachs hollow. The younger ones look to Elani, desperation in their eyes. Sister Theodorus, the eldest, speaks first. They want us to take it, to feel gratitude, to soften. Elani nods. Then we fast. They do not touch the food. By the third day, their lips are bleeding from dryness. Their hands tremble uncontrollably. The youngest can barely stand, but none of them break. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms crossed. He's impressed, frustrated, and for a brief moment, something that almost resembles respect flickers across his face. But respect does not change the plan. On the third day, the doors open again. This time it is not a servant. It is Hassan himself. He speaks in Turkish, and the translator follows like a shadow. You are not criminals. You are not enemies. You are simply mistaken. The Sultan is merciful. He offers you new lives, new names, protection. All you must do is speak the words. Silence. Or, he continues, you may come with us to Constantinople. There, the Sultan himself will hear your case. Perhaps he will be moved by your conviction. He pauses, letting his next sentence sink in. But the road is long, and the weak do not survive it. It isn't a threat. It is a promise. Sister Elani looks at her sisters, some barely conscious, some whispering prayers with closed eyes, some staring at the floor as if searching for strength inside the stone. Then she turns back to Hassan. We will walk. The smile returns to his lips. Good. We leave at dawn. That night the nuns cling to one another in the darkness. No one speaks, but Sister Magdalena begins to hum, a hymn they sang at Vespers. Slowly, the others join her. Outside, soldiers hear it. Some pause, some look away. One of them, years later, will tell his grandson about the women who sang themselves to death. But that story will also be forgotten. For now, the hymn rises through the cracks in the chapel walls and drifts into the night. A prayer, a plea, a declaration. We are still here. They leave at dawn on the fourth day. 23 women, hands bound with rope, walking south toward the coast. No carts, no horses, just their feet, the dust and the sun that shows no mercy. The soldiers don't rush them. They don't have to. The road itself is the punishment. By the second day, Sister Irene collapses. She's 62. Her knees have been failing for years. She tries to stand, but her legs can no longer hold her. The soldiers don't wait. Sister Magdalena and another nun, Sister Anna, lift her between them and carry her for the next 3 miles. When they finally stop for the night, Irene is unconscious. By morning, she's gone. They bury her by the roadside with their bare hands. No tools, no ceremony, just dirt and whispered prayers. The soldiers watch, but don't interfere. Hassan Pasha simply makes a note in his ledger. 22 remaining. On the fourth day, it happens again. Sister Callista, who hasn't spoken since the siege, simply stops walking. She sits down in the middle of the road, closes her eyes, and does not get up. They leave her there. By the time they reach the port of Volos 7 days later, only 18 remain. But something happened on that road, something the Ottomans did not anticipate. The nuns stopped weeping, stopped begging. They walked in silence, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of women who had already made their choice. Sister Elani had been walking at the front of the line, leading them even with her hands bound. But on the morning of the 7th day, Hassan Pasha calls for her. She is brought to his tent alone. What happens next isn't described in Ottoman military records. It is described in a letter from a Venetian merchant who saw the aftermath, a letter discovered in 2003 in the archives of Dubrovnik. He writes, "I saw them bring her back at dawn. She could not walk. Her eyes, God forgive me, her eyes were open, but she was not inside them anymore. They dressed her in silk and paraded her through the camp as a convert. But when I passed close, I heard her lips moving. She was still praying in Latin, silently. She had not broken. They had simply taken her body and left her soul to wander." This is the Ottoman strategy history never teaches you. They didn't want martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written. Stories are told. The dead become saints. They wanted ghosts. Women who would walk, talk, eat, breathe, but never be whole again. Living proof that rebellion was pointless. Living warnings to anyone who believed faith could stand against empire. Sister Elani walked with them the rest of the way to the coast, but she never spoke again, never looked anyone in the eye. She was there, but she wasn't. The younger sisters cried when they saw her. The older ones only prayed harder. At the port of Volos, they are loaded onto a galley, a massive warship with long rows of benches and chains bolted into the wood. This is not a passenger ship. This is a vessel designed for control. Slaves, Prisoners, cargo. The nuns are chained to the benches, their wrists locked to iron rings. A ship's manifest discovered in 1987 in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace Museum lists them not by name but by number. Religious captives, female, 18. Destination, imperial household. Purpose, domestic service and conversion. That word service is carrying a very heavy meaning. The voyage lasts 12 days. The sea is cruel. Storms slam against the deck. Salt spray burns their cracked lips. The ship pitches and rolls violently. And these women, who have never seen the ocean, vomit until there is nothing left inside them. At night, the youngest, Sister Magdalena, whispers psalms under her breath. Her voice is faint, nearly lost beneath the crashing waves. But the other prisoners, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men and women chained beside them, turn their heads to listen. For a moment, the sea feels calm. When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus, the sisters see the skyline of Constantinople rising before them. Domes, minarets, endless walls. The city gleams in the dawn like a blade. For centuries, it had been called the city of the world's desire. Now it would become their cage. From the docks, they are marched through narrow streets lined with merchants, soldiers, and slaves. People stop to stare. Christian nuns among the captives are rare, even in an empire built on conquest. This is unusual. They're led past the ancient walls, through the imperial district, past gardens where fountains sing and peacocks cry out. Then, in the shadow of Hagia Sophia, the great church now turned mosque, they are forced to stop, to kneel. As the call to prayer echoes from the minarets, one of the sisters whispers, "We are home, but it is no longer ours." They're taken to the palace, not to the grand halls, not to the courtyards where ambassadors walk and viziers negotiate. They're taken beneath it, down stone steps that twist into darkness, through tunnels that smell of damp and decay, to a place that does not officially exist. If you're still watching, it's because some part of you knows this story must be told. Subscribe to Crimson Historians, not for us, but for them, for the voices that were swallowed by silence. Now, let's follow them into the dark. Beneath Topkapi Palace lies a network of tunnels that tourists never see. Storage rooms, servant quarters, forgotten corridors twisting through the bedrock like veins. And in the farthest corner, sealed away for centuries, there was a room with no official purpose. In 2011, during restoration work, archaeologists broke through a false wall. What they found froze them in place. Scratched into the stone, barely visible, were crosses, dozens of them, small, crude, carved with fingernails or shards of broken pottery. And beneath those crosses, etched in Latin, were 4 words, lux in tenebris, luce. The light shines in the darkness. This was their chapel. For months, maybe years, these women lived beneath the palace, working as silent servants by day, scrubbing floors, washing linens, tending fires for rooms they would never be allowed to enter. But at night, when the palace slept, they slipped into this forgotten room and prayed. They had no priest, no altar, no Bible, only memory. They recited psalms from heart, lines half remembered and reshaped into prayers that kept them alive. They sang hymns in whispers, so faint the stone barely caught them. They held communion with bread stolen from the kitchens and water drawn from palace wells. And they carved their faith into stone, one scratch at a time, knowing no one might ever see it. Sister Magdalena was among them, the girl who had whispered psalms on the ship, who had carried Sister Irene along the road, who had refused to look away when they brought Sister Elani back, dressed in silk. She became their voice in the darkness. The archaeologists found her mark too, a small bird scratched into the corner of the wall. Beside it, 23 lines, one for each sister. But only 11 lines were complete. The rest trailed off into nothing. They used broken pottery as candle holders, a scrap of linen as an altar cloth. From a shard of a shattered mirror, they fashioned a crude cross. In this secret chapel, they gathered each night after the palace slept. No hymns, no sermons, only whispers. Each woman knelt and shared a memory. Her home, her church bell, the warmth of bread before dawn. These memories became their new psalms, small offerings to a God who still listened in the dark. A Venetian prisoner held in the palace for ransom in 1478 wrote about strange voices echoing beneath the harem, women singing in Latin to a God not of this empire. For centuries, historians dismissed it as superstition until they found the chapel. But here is what breaks your heart. The crosses stop. Halfway through the wall, the scratches become erratic, desperate. The lines deepen as if carved with more force, more urgency. Then nothing. Ottoman records from 1482 mention a cleansing of the palace staff under the new sultan. Anyone deemed unproductive or resistant was removed. No details, no names, no burial sites. Just one line in a ledger written in neat Ottoman script. Disposed. The nuns of St. Catherine vanished from history. 18 women who had walked 7 days through hell, who had crossed the sea in chains, who had carved prayers into stone in the dark, gone. But their chapel remained. A French diplomat in 1712 wrote about a rumor among the older palace servants. On certain nights, if you stood in the lower halls, the air would grow cold, and if you listened closely, you could hear women singing in Latin. He dismissed it as superstition, the foolish beliefs of uneducated servants. But the walls don't lie. In 2011, when archaeologists examined the chapel more closely, they found something else. Traces of wax, not from Ottoman candles, but from a different source, older, mixed with herbs. The kind of candles nuns made in convents, which means they kept their vigil far longer than anyone had believed. Months, maybe years, carving crosses, whispering prayers, refusing to disappear. Sister Magdalena's bird was the last mark on the wall. Beside it, scratched so faintly it was almost invisible, were 2 words in Greek: we endure. But the truth is, they didn't just endure. They left behind something that empires couldn't erase. A room full of crosses, a prayer carved into stone, proof that faith could survive where walls and chains could not. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922, 600 years of conquest and power. But in the end, it was those scratches on the wall that survived. Not the Sultan's decrees, not Hassan Pasha's ledgers, not the silk they forced onto Sister Elani. Just 4 Latin words carved by women the world forgot. Lux in tenebris lucere. The light shines in the darkness. So why does this story matter? Because it's not about religion. It's not even about the Ottomans. It's about what power does when it tries to erase people, and what happens when those people refuse to disappear. The Ottoman Empire lasted 600 years.